The rain battered Caleb's pickup truck, each drop a hammer against the rusted roof, as he stared at the boy on his porch. 10 years old, soaked to the bone, clutching a duffel bag like it was his only anchor. Caleb's heart clenched, not with warmth, but with a bitterness that had festered for years. He hadn't seen his brother, Nathan, in a decade, not since the fight that tore their family apart. Nathan had chosen love over legacy, walking away from their small Virginia town with his partner, David, leaving Caleb to carry the weight of their parents' expectations. Now Nathan was gone, killed in a car accident with David, and this boy Elliot was all that remained. Caleb didn't want him. He couldn't. Raising a child, especially this child, felt like betraying everything he'd been taught to believe. The town of Willow Creek hadn't changed much since Caleb was a kid. Same white church steeple piercing the sky. Same gossip that clung like damp moss to every conversation. Homosexuality was a sin here, whispered about in hushed tones at Sunday service. Caleb had grown up hearing it, believing it, even as Nathan defied it. When the lawyer called about Elliot, Caleb's first instinct was to say no. Let the state handle it. But something guilt, maybe, or the ghost of his brother's voice made him open the door. Elliot stood there, shivering, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes, a startling green like Nathan's, held a quiet defiance that unnerved Caleb. "You're my uncle, right?" the boy asked, voice steady despite the cold. Caleb grunted, stepping aside. "Get inside before you catch pneumonia." The house was a mess, a bachelor's haven of empty beer cans and unwashed dishes. Caleb hadn't planned on company, let alone a kid. He tossed Elliot a towel and pointed to the couch. "You'll sleep there tonight. We'll figure this out tomorrow." Elliot didn't move. He set his bag down carefully, pulling out a small, leather-bound journal. "Dad said you'd hate me," he said, not looking up. "But he told me to give you this." Caleb froze. The journal was Nathan's, its edges worn from years of use. He didn't touch it, didn't want to. "Keep it," he said gruffly. "I don't need his words." Elliot's gaze met his, sharp and unyielding. "He said you'd say that too." That night, Caleb lay awake, the rain a relentless drumbeat against the windows. He didn't want this kid here, didn't want the memories Elliot dragged in like mud on his boots. Nathan had always been the brave one, the one who stood up to their father's belt and their mother's tears. Caleb had stayed silent, safe, choosing the town's approval over his brother's truth. Now, with Elliot asleep on the couch, clutching that journal, Caleb felt the weight of his choices pressing down. Morning brought no clarity. Caleb drove Elliot to the local diner, ignoring the stares from folks who knew his family's story. Mrs. Hargrove, the waitress, clucked sympathetically. "Poor thing, losing both his daddies like that," she said, pouring coffee. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't correct her, but the word daddies grated, a reminder of the life Nathan had chosen. Elliot ate his pancakes in silence, watching Caleb like he was solving a puzzle. "Why don't you want me?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the diner's hum. Caleb's fork paused midair. "It's not about you, kid. It's complicated." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "Dad said you're scared. Scared of what people think." The word stung, slicing through years of buried shame. Caleb wanted to snap back, to tell the kid he didn't know anything, but the truth in those green eyes stopped him. Instead, he paid the bill and drove them home, the journal still untouched on the coffee table. Over the next few days, Caleb kept his distance, leaving Elliot to wander the house or sit on the porch with that journal. The boy didn't push, didn't beg for attention, but his presence was a constant pressure, like a bruise Caleb couldn't ignore. He called the social worker, asking about foster care. But the woman's voice was firm. You're his only family. Mr. Harper. He's got nowhere else to go. Caleb hung up, cursing under his breath. He didn't want to be responsible for this kid. Didn't want to face the town's whispers or the memories of Nathan's defiance. But every night, Elliot's quiet snores from the couch chipped away at his resolve. And that journal seemed to hum with secrets Caleb wasn't ready to face. By the end of the week, Caleb caught Elliot writing in the journal, his small hands moving with purpose. What's in there? Caleb asked, unable to stop himself. Elliot looked up, his expression guarded. Dad's stories. And mine. Caleb's chest tightened. He didn't ask more, but the seed of curiosity had been planted, and it scared him more than he'd admit. The days stretched into a tense routine. Caleb went to work at the auto shop, leaving Elliot with a key and a warning to stay out of trouble. Willow Creek wasn't kind to outsiders, and Elliot, with his city clothes and quiet intensity, was as outsider as it got. Caleb heard the whispers at the shop, old men muttering about that boy and Nathan's choices. He ignored them, but each word was a splinter under his skin. Elliot, for his part, seemed unfazed. He spent his days exploring the town, the journal always tucked under his arm. Caleb found him one afternoon sitting by the creek, sketching the water's edge. The boy's focus was unnerving, like he was searching for something in the ripples. You don't talk much, Caleb said, leaning against a tree. Elliot shrugged. Dad said words are for when you've got something worth saying. Caleb snorted, but the ache in his chest grew. Nathan had always been like that, quiet until he wasn't, then unstoppable. He'd stood up to their father at 16, declaring he loved David with a fire that left their family in ashes. Caleb had watched, silent, as Nathan left. Now, looking at Elliot, he saw that same fire, banked but burning. That night, Caleb found the journal open on the coffee table. He didn't mean to look, but a single line caught his eye. Caleb's not a bad man. He's just lost. Nathan's handwriting, sharp and familiar, hit like a punch. Caleb slammed the journal shut, his hands shaking. He didn't want Nathan's forgiveness, didn't deserve it. The next morning, Elliot was gone. Panic seized Caleb as he searched the house, the yard, the street. He found the boy at the town's edge, sitting on a bench by the old oak tree, the journal open in his lap. You can't just run off, Caleb snapped, his voice rougher than he meant. Elliot didn't flinch. I wasn't running. I was thinking. About what? Caleb asked, softer now, his fear cooling. About why Dad thought you'd change your mind. Caleb's throat tightened. He sat beside Elliot, the bench creaking under his weight. For the first time, he noticed the boy's hands calloused, like Nathan's had been from years of sketching. What's in that book that's so damn important? He asked. Elliot hesitated, then handed it over. Read it. But only if you want to. Caleb took the journal, its weight heavier than it should have been. He didn't open it. Not yet. But he carried it back to the house, Elliot trailing behind. That night, alone in his room, he cracked the cover. Nathan's words spilled out stories of his life with David, their love, their struggles, their joy in raising Elliot. Each page was a window into a world Caleb had refused to see, and it hurt more than he expected. The journal wasn't just Nathan's. Elliot had added his own entries, childish scrawl mixed with surprising depth. One page described the night Nathan and David died, how Elliot had sat in the hospital, alone, clutching this very book. Dad said Uncle Caleb would come. He promised. Caleb's eyes burned. He closed the journal, unable to read more. The boy's faith in him, in Nathan's belief, was a weight he wasn't ready to carry. But the next day, When Elliot asked to visit the creek again, Caleb went with him. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt differentless, like a wall, more like a bridge. At the shop, the whispers grew louder. A co-worker, Tom, cornered Caleb during a break. "You really keeping that kid? Folks are talking, saying he's like his dad's." Caleb's fists clenched. "He's family," he said, the words surprising him. Tom backed off, but the encounter left Caleb shaken. He wasn't defending Elliot, not really, just the idea of him. But it was a start. That evening, Elliot showed Caleb a sketch from the journal, portrait of Nathan and David, laughing together. They were happy, Elliot said, his voice soft but firm, even when people hated them. Caleb looked at the drawing, at the love captured in every line. For the first time, he wondered what he'd missed, staying silent all those years. Weeks passed, and the journal became a quiet presence in Caleb's life. He read it in stolen moments, each page chipping away at the walls he'd built. Nathan's entries were raw, unfiltered stories of rejection, of finding love with David, of building a family despite the world's cruelty. Elliot's additions were simpler but no less powerful, filled with a child's hope and grief. Caleb started noticing Elliot more, the way he'd hum while washing dishes, the way he'd pause to watch birds outside. The boy was resilient, but there was a fragility in him, a fear of being unwanted that Caleb recognized too well. He'd felt it himself, growing up under their father's iron rule. One Sunday, Caleb took Elliot to the creek again, the journal tucked in his jacket. The town was quiet, the church service still in session. They sat on the bank, skipping stones. "You ever miss them?" Elliot asked, his voice barely above the water's murmur. "Every day," Caleb admitted, surprising himself. He hadn't meant to say it, but the truth slipped out. Nathan was. He was better than me. Braver. Elliot nodded, like he'd known this all along. He said you could be brave too, if you tried. Caleb's laugh was bitter. He was wrong about a lot of things. No, he wasn't. Elliot's voice was fierce, his eyes blazing. He believed in you, even when you didn't. The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Caleb wanted to argue, to push back, but the journal in his pocket felt like a heartbeat. That night, he read more, finding an entry Nathan wrote the year Elliot was born. "Caleb's still out there, lost in that town. I hope one day he finds his way home." Home. The word stung. Caleb had stayed in Willow Creek, but he'd never felt at home, not since Nathan left. Now, with Elliot here, the house felt different, fuller. But the town's judgment loomed, a storm waiting to break. It broke the next day. At the grocery store, Mrs. Hargrove pulled Caleb aside. "Folks are saying you're raising that boy wrong, letting him hold onto his father's ways. Pastor's planning to talk to you." Caleb's blood ran cold. "Let them talk," he said, but his voice shook. He grabbed Elliot's hand and left, the boy's confusion palpable. At home, Elliot asked, "Are they going to take me away?" "No," Caleb said, the word a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. But the fear in Elliot's eyes mirrored his own, and for the first time, Caleb felt protective, not just obligated. He started teaching Elliot small things: how to change a tire, how to fish. They weren't close, not yet, but the moments felt like steps toward something. One evening, Elliot showed Caleb another sketch, a rough outline of the two of them by the creek. "It's us," Elliot said, shy but proud. Caleb's throat tightened. He didn't say anything, but he kept the sketch on the fridge, a quiet claim on this new life. The journal revealed more as Caleb read on. Nathan had written about their childhood, about the nights they'd sneak out to the creek, dreaming of a world beyond Willow Creek. One entry gutted him. I wish Caleb could see what I see in David. Love isn't a sin. It's the only thing that makes sense. Caleb closed the journal, his hands trembling. He looked at Elliot, asleep on the couch, and wondered what Nathan would think of him now still scared, but trying. The pastor's visit came on a Tuesday, unannounced. Pastor Reynolds stood on Caleb's porch, Bible in hand, his smile tight. We're concerned, Caleb, he said, glancing at Elliot, who was reading on the couch. That boy needs guidance, not confusion. Caleb's jaw clenched. He's got a home. That's enough. The pastor's eyes narrowed. This town has values. Your brother ignored them, and now you're raising his son to do the same. Caleb wanted to slam the door, but Elliot was watching, his journal open in his lap. Thanks for your concern, Caleb said, voice tight. We're fine. After the pastor left, Elliot asked, why does he hate me? He doesn't. Caleb lied, then softened. He just doesn't understand. Elliot's gaze was steady. Like you didn't. The truth cut deep. Caleb sat beside him, the journal between them. I'm trying, kid. I am. That night, Caleb read more of Nathan's words. Elliot's our miracle. He sees the world with open eyes. I hope Caleb sees it too. Someday. The words were a challenge. One Caleb wasn't sure he could meet. But he kept reading, drawn to the love in every line. The life Nathan and David had built despite the world's cruelty. The town's pressure didn't let up. At the shop, Tom and the others grew bolder, their comments sharper. You're gonna ruin that kid, Tom said one day, tossing a wrench, letting him think his dads were normal. Caleb's fist tightened, but he didn't swing. He's my family, he said, the words stronger now. He walked away, but the encounter left him rattled. He wasn't Nathan, wasn't brave enough to fight the whole town. But for Elliot, he wanted to try. He started taking Elliot to the creek more often, their talks growing longer. Elliot shared stories from the journal how Nathan and David had taught him to draw, to love fiercely, to stand tall. Caleb listened, each story a thread pulling him closer to the brother he'd lost. One evening, Elliot showed Caleb a letter tucked in the journal's back. It was from Nathan, addressed to Caleb, dated a month before the accident. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Take care of Elliot. He's got a secret worth knowing, but you'll have to earn it. Caleb's heart pounded. What's the secret? He asked Elliot, his voice low. Elliot smiled, small and sad. You'll see. Keep reading. Caleb did, diving deeper into the journal. Nathan's entries grew more personal, detailing the night he and David adopted Elliot, the joy of their little family. Elliot's own words painted a picture of loss, but also hope. Dad said Uncle Caleb's heart is bigger than he thinks. I believe him. The words shook Caleb. He looked at Elliot, sketching by the window, and felt something shift a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. He wasn't ready to tear it down, but for the first time, he wanted to. At the shop the next day, Caleb overheard Tom talking to a customer about Elliot, calling him that queer kid. Something snapped. Caleb marched over, voice low but firm. You don't talk about my nephew like that. Ever. Tom blinked, stunned. The shop went quiet. Caleb didn't care. For the first time, he felt like he was standing up, not just standing still. That night, he sat with Elliot on the porch, the journal open between them. You're not so bad, kid, Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. Elliot grinned. You're not so bad either. The journal became Caleb's nightly ritual, each page a step into Nathan's world. He read about the small victories: David's promotion, Elliot's first drawing, their quiet nights together. He read about the pain, too, the slurs, the rejection, the fear of losing Elliot to a system that didn't understand their family. Nathan's love for David and Elliot shone through every word, a beacon in the dark. Caleb started seeing Elliot differently. The boy wasn't just a reminder of Nathan's defiance. He was a living piece of it. At the creek one afternoon, Elliot taught Caleb how to draw a bird, their hands smudged with charcoal. Dad said art makes you free, Elliot said, his voice soft. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. He was right about that. The town's judgment grew heavier. Pastor Reynolds visited again, this time with a social worker. "We're worried about Elliot's environment," the pastor said, his tone dripping with false concern. "This town can offer him a proper home." Caleb's blood boiled. "He's got a home," he said, stepping in front of Elliot. "With me." The social worker looked skeptical but left after a tense exchange. Elliot clung to Caleb's side, his eyes wide. "You meant that?" he asked later. "Yeah," Caleb said, surprised by his own certainty. "I did." That night, Caleb found a new entry in the journal, one Elliot had written recently. "Uncle Caleb's trying. I think he's starting to get it." The words hit hard, a mix of pride and shame. He wasn't there yet, but he was moving. The next day, Caleb took Elliot to the library, ignoring the stares. They checked out art books, and Elliot's face lit up, a rare smile breaking through. On the way home, they stopped at the diner, where Mrs. Hargrove slipped Elliot an extra cookie. "You're doing good, Caleb," she whispered. It was the first kind word he'd heard in weeks. But trouble brewed. At church that Sunday, Pastor Reynolds preached about protecting the children. His eyes locked on Caleb. The congregation murmured, their gazes heavy. Caleb left early, Elliot's hand in his. But the message was clear: the town wanted Elliot gone. Caleb's resolve hardened. He started looking into schools, ones outside Willow Creek, where Elliot might have a chance to be himself. The thought scared him. Leaving meant facing a world he didn't know, one Nathan had navigated without him. But for Elliot, he'd try. The journal revealed more of Nathan's hopes. Elliot's got a light in him. Protect it, Caleb. Caleb read those words under the dim glow of his lamp, Elliot asleep on the couch. He wasn't sure he could protect that light, but he wanted to. One evening, Elliot showed Caleb a drawing of their house, a rainbow faintly sketched in the sky. "It's how I see it," Elliot said, shy but proud. Caleb's chest ached. He saw Nathan in that drawing, in Elliot's quiet courage. For the first time, he wondered if he could be brave too, not just for Elliot, but for himself. Caleb's world was shifting, and it terrified him. The journal was nearly finished, each page a mirror to his own failures and Nathan's strength. One entry stopped him cold. "Caleb, if you're reading this, you're already changing. Don't stop." Nathan's faith in him felt like a lifeline, but also a weight. Could he live up to it? Elliot noticed the change. He started talking more, sharing stories of Nathan and David, how they'd dance in the kitchen, how they'd read to him every night. Caleb listened, hungry for pieces of the life he'd rejected. He started asking questions, and Elliot's answers painted a picture of love so fierce it shamed Caleb's silence. The town's pressure didn't ease. At the shop, Tom and the others grew hostile, their comments barbed. "You're turning into your brother," Tom sneered one day. Caleb didn't flinch. "Good," he said, walking away. The word felt like a rebellion, small but real. Caleb started standing up for Elliot outside the shop too. When a neighbor questioned why Elliot carried that book everywhere, Caleb snapped, "It's his. Leave him be." The neighbor backed off, But the encounter left Caleb shaken. He wasn't used to fighting. Not like Nathan had. One night, Elliot woke from a nightmare, his cries piercing the quiet house. Caleb sat with him, awkward but present, until the boy calmed. "I miss them," Elliot whispered, clutching the journal. "I know," Caleb said, his voice rough. "I miss him too." The next day, Caleb took Elliot to the creek, their ritual now a comfort. Elliot showed him a new sketch of family portrait, with Nathan, David, Elliot, and Caleb. "You're part of it," Elliot said, his voice steady. Caleb's eyes burned. He didn't deserve that place. Not yet. But he wanted to. He started planning in earnest researching schools, even jobs in bigger cities where Elliot could be himself. The idea of leaving Willow Creek was daunting, but the thought of losing Elliot was worse. The journal's final pages were Elliot's, written in the months since the accident. One entry broke Caleb's heart. "I thought Uncle Caleb would send me away. But he's still here. Maybe he's my family now." Caleb closed the journal, tears falling. He looked at Elliot, sketching by the window, and knew he couldn't let him go. Not to foster care, not to the town's judgment. Elliot was his, and he'd fight for him. That fight came sooner than expected. The social worker returned, this time with a court order. "There's been a complaint," she said, her voice cold. "We need to evaluate Elliot's placement." Caleb's blood ran cold. He looked at Elliot, who stood frozen, clutching the journal. "He's staying with me," Caleb said, his voice a low growl. The social worker's eyes softened, but she didn't back down. "We'll see," she said, leaving Caleb with a sinking feeling that the battle was just beginning. The court order hung over Caleb like a storm cloud. He hired a lawyer, a gruff woman from Richmond who didn't flinch at Willow Creek's small-mindedness. "You've got a fight on your hands," she said, reviewing the case. "The town's claiming you're unfit because of your brother's lifestyle." Caleb's fists clenched. "It's not about Nathan. It's about Elliot." The lawyer nodded, impressed. "Then let's prove it." Caleb dove into the journal again, searching for answers. Nathan's final entry was a letter to Elliot. "Your secret is your heart. Share it with Caleb when he's ready. He'll understand." Caleb's pulse quickened. The secret wasn't just the journal, it was something deeper, something Elliot hadn't revealed. He found Elliot on the porch, sketching the oak tree. "What's your secret, kid?" Caleb asked, his voice gentle. Elliot looked up, his green eyes searching. "Dad said to wait until you loved me." The words hit like a tidal wave. Caleb wanted to say he did, but the truth was he was still learning how. Instead, he hugged Elliot, the boy's small frame trembling against him. It was the first time they'd touched like that, and it felt like a promise. The town's campaign grew uglier. Flyers appeared, calling Caleb a sinner for supporting Nathan's life. Pastor Reynolds visited again, offering to save Elliot. Caleb slammed the door in his face, his heart pounding with a rage he hadn't known he could feel. He started packing, researching apartments in Richmond. Willow Creek wasn't home anymore. Not for him, not for Elliot. But leaving meant facing a world he'd avoided, one where he'd have to confront his own fears. Elliot helped, his quiet strength a mirror of Nathan's. One night, he showed Caleb a drawinga rainbow over their house, vibrant and bold. "This is my secret," Elliot said. "I want to be like my dad's. I want to love who I want." Caleb's breath caught. He saw Nathan in Elliot's defiance, David in his quiet resolve. "You will," he said, his voice thick. "I'll make sure of it." The lawyer called with news. The court hearing was in a week. Caleb spent every moment preparing, gathering letters from Mrs. Hargrove and others who'd seen him with Elliot. He read the journal again, memorizing Nathan's words, drawing strength from them. The night before the hearing, Elliot gave Caleb a new sketch of family. Just the two of them, standing together. "We're enough," Elliot said, his voice steady. Caleb nodded, tears in his eyes. "Yeah, kid. We are." The courtroom was small, the air thick with tension. Caleb sat beside Elliot, his heart pounding as the judge reviewed the case. The town's lawyer painted Caleb as unfit, citing his support for Nathan's lifestyle, his bachelor habits, his lack of experience. Caleb's lawyer countered, presenting letters from Mrs. Hargrove, the librarian, even a co-worker who'd seen Caleb change. Elliot sat quiet, the journal in his lap. Caleb squeezed his hand, a silent promise. When the judge asked Elliot to speak, the boy stood, his voice clear. "Uncle Caleb's my family. He's learning, just like Dad said he would." The room stilled. Caleb's eyes burned, Nathan's words echoing in his mind. He'll understand. The judge called a recess, and Caleb hugged Elliot, whispering, "I'm proud of you." The journal's final gift came that night. Caleb found a hidden page, tucked in the Bendiga letter from David, Nathan's partner. "Caleb, you were Nathan's home, even when you didn't know it. Be Elliot's too." Caleb wept, the weight of his brother's love breaking him open. He saw it now. The secret wasn't just Elliot's heart, but his own. He'd been afraid to love, afraid to lose, but Elliot had shown him how. The judge's ruling came the next day. Elliot would stay with Caleb. The town's whispers didn't stop, but Caleb didn't care. He and Elliot packed their things, the journal safely in Elliot's bag. They drove to Richmond, a new city, a new start. Their apartment was small, but it was theirs. Elliot hung his drawings, rainbows and all, and Caleb found a job at a garage. They visited the creek one last time before leaving, scattering Nathan's ashes where he'd once dreamed of freedom. Years later, Caleb watched Elliot graduate high school, his boyfriend by his side. The journal sat on Caleb's shelf, its pages worn but cherished. Elliot's secret had changed him, not just his heart, but his entire life. He'd become the brother Nathan always believed he could be, and the father Elliot needed. As they stood together, the rainbow flag waving above, Caleb felt Nathan's presence, his love a quiet strength. He'd refused to raise his brother's son, but in the end, Elliot had raised him.